Afternoon, everybody. I'd just like to declare Annual Plan Long-Term Plan Committee meeting AP LTP 24/4 open and welcome all present. Just remind you that this meeting is being live streamed and Zoom is available. I'll just commence with the karakia. Whakatau mai te wairua, whakawatia mai te hinenaro, whakariti mai te tinana, kia e ai ngā mahi, ai. Note, we have our auditors, staff, visitors, and as well as councillors here. I note that all councillors are present, so we have no apologies. Do we don't have any considerations of late items? Are there any declarations of conflict of interest anyone wishes to declare? Seems no. We have no public excluded items. We go to public forum. I understand, Dr. McCabe, you wish to speak, is that correct? Yes, please. Would you like to come forward now, please?
I'm Bruce McCabe. I'm the chairman of the Aotearoa Residents and Ratepayers Association. I wish to speak on the setting of dog registration fees. Now, the results of surveys undertaken by ORA and the council show that a vast majority of the residents support user pays for dog services. The proposed dog registration fees, which are insufficient to cover the cost of dog services provided by council, are inconsistent with the results of these surveys. Dog owners have made a voluntary decision to purchase a dog, knowing full well that there is a legal requirement to register their dog and to pay a dog registration fee, no matter what it is. The designers of dogs that seem to be popular in Aotearoa cost up to $5,000, and the maintenance costs of these dogs are not insignificant. For example, around $300 to $500 to have their teeth cleaned. Compared to the purchase and maintenance cost for these pets, the annual dog registration fee is a minor to insignificant cost. The big question is whether, during this cost of living crisis, it is appropriate or morally justifiable for residents to be required to subsidise dog owners for their ownership of a pet. There is no tangible benefit for ratepayers in so doing. Why should we be required to do it? Has the maintenance cost, estimated at about $7,000 per year for a dog exercise area, been included in the cost for providing dog services? Has the contribution to be made from dog registration fees to construct the proposed dog exercise areas been allowed for during the calculation of the dog registration fees? Some $27,000 is required for each of the proposed exercise areas. It is reasonable to expect, or is it reasonable to expect urban ratepayers to contribute the proposed $7,000 per year for the maintenance of dog exercise areas? This cost should be totally borne by the users of these facilities, namely dog owners. So how big is the dog services account operating deficit proposed by council officers? It's not entirely clear with the information provided. What further increase in dog registration fees is required to cover the operating deficit proposed by council officers? What further increases in dog registration fees would be required to cover the costs of, firstly, the dog account contribution to the construction of the proposed dog exercise areas, and secondly, the full maintenance cost of the proposed and existing dog exercise areas? A call on community board funds is not considered appropriate to fund the construction of dog exercise areas. This would require ratepayers to contribute financially to their construction, for which they gain no benefit, and foregoing other financial contributions for projects that benefit all ratepayers. I recommend that the proposed dog fees be rejected and revised so that the dog services operate on a user pays basis as indicated by both the council and ORA surveys. And I should point out that there was less than 10% support for rates input into dog services. In other words, 90% of people surveyed think it should be user pays. Now, the proposed rate increase of over 13.6% for the next financial year, and then 10 point something for the following year, and 8.4% for the subsequent years, is a hefty burden to lump on ratepayers, and you could start the process of reducing rates requirements by eliminating this cost to ratepayers. Open for questions.
Do we have any questions, Mr. McCabe? Seems not. Oh, sorry, we do. Yep. Thank you. Councillor Murray-Benge.
Bruce, you see that there is a deficit in the dog account. Have you been able to find out as to how much that is?
No, I haven't.
Neither have we. Maybe that could be passed to staff, sir.
Thank you. I'm sure it's been recorded and noted. Thank you. Councillor Joyce.
So, things you're talking about the general sort of long-term plan. Are you aware that of a proposal that up to 75% of animal control costs be met from rates as part of the new revenue and financing policy?
No, I'm totally unaware of that.
It's also on the agenda. Some costs for animal control are for the public good. They're dangerous dogs, unlike that have nothing to do with ownership. Do you see even a small proportion of rates income for the public good being used for animal control?
I think yes, if the council is a lot firmer with how it deals with owners and dogs that don't obey the law. I mean, at the moment, it's very much a slap on the wrist with a wet bus ticket. If owners knew there would be more harsh responses to wayward dogs, unlicensed dogs, then perhaps they would act differently.
I know this is a time for questions, Mr. McCabe, but it's well known that there are cases of dogs being removed from owners, of substantial fines being levied against them for wandering fines. So I think that's a bit more than a slap on the wrist. But you had another question, Councillor Murray-Benge?
Yes, I do. Forgotten what it was. It's Bruce, could you please tell us, in relation to the dog exercise areas, did your survey take a look at the cost of fencing off dog control areas and the reaction of people to that?
Our main focus on the proposed dog exercise areas was cost, and where ratepayers felt that those costs should lie. But I've also had contact with owners of properties adjacent to, or I should say contiguous with, where a dog park is proposed in Aotearoa, and have come to the conclusion that the consultation that council undertook to identify a location has been totally inadequate, and it will impose severe disadvantage to those landowners that council should reconsider when they're thinking about where, if and where they should locate a dog park.
Is it your view that the funding put aside for the dog parks should go back into the dog reserve account?
I think my opinion is, and that of the people that answered our survey and the council long-term plan survey about funding of dog parks is that it should be fully funded by dog owners. So if that means the funds go back into there, if that's the way you put it, yes, but my way of speaking is that the funds to fund dog parks on the council's part should come out of the dog account. It really doesn't matter where else they get money from, but council's contribution should come out of the dog park so that dog owners, people who are going to benefit from dog parks should pay.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cox here.
Got a wonky one. Can you hear me all right? Oh, yeah. Dr. McCabe, I note on your submission 182 respondents. Were they all ORA members or are they members of the general Mokoroa community?
The survey went out to ORA members, so there might be a bit of leakage, but they will be predominantly ORA members.
Okay, so I just want to ask a question. What do you think the general sense in Aomokoroa is regarding, and I mean not just ORA's view, or collective view, what is the general feeling in Aomokoroa, do you think, about dog parks, or yes or no, and where? Can I get a bit of an idea from you on that?
General feeling, talking to people, is they don't want them. They think there are adequate walkways that people use for walking their dogs. There are adequate open park areas that people put their well-trained dogs off leash and they run around and cause no problems. So Aomokoroa residents that I've spoken to don't feel the need for them.
Okay, we've got one more question. Councillor Henry.
Yeah, so we're going through the same exercise in Katikati, and it's interesting that you said that the residents that are surrounding the proposed dog park area in Aomokoroa, I'm assuming that I hear you that you're saying that they weren't consulted because that didn't happen in Katikati. There's been lots of consultation with the community that's surrounding the proposed the dog park area that's been set for Katikati. So are you saying that didn't happen in Aomokoroa?
Speaking to the people that own the properties, and I use the word contiguous.
Yeah, these are the
property.
people who border it in Katikati.
Yes, yeah. The initial consultation did not indicate that the dog exercise area would be jammed up against their properties. So their property fences will actually form a large part of the exterior of the dog area. The general impression from the information that was provided for consultation in the Linley Park area is that it was over a large park area, but it's not.
Not the specific area.
Yeah, and that's only come up of late, and I think most of the councillors are aware of that because those property owners have made personal submissions to councillors to bring them up to speed with what the situation actually is.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Right, we need to wrap it up there. We've gone quite a bit over time, but thank you for coming in, Mr. McCabe, and for answering all the questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on with our agenda then, we have no presentations. And so we move then to reports. And the first report is for the adoption of the dog control and health registration fees. So Dougal, would you like to come and present this to us, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair, before Dougal presents his report, I just wanted to acknowledge the submission that's been made by Dr. McCabe here today, and probably just to acknowledge a couple of things around the dog park area. The paper today is substantially looking at dog fees. It's not to debate at this point in time around whether or not we proceed with dog parks. That is a separate report
that will be coming to Strategy and Policy Committee in the next couple of weeks. But what I wanted to probably just highlight is that the dog parks that council has put forward in terms of proposals was a result of consultation that council did in 2016, which was around our dog policy and our dog bylaw. And the feedback from the community at that point in time was that our council should proceed with dog parks. And I know there's a number of elected members around the table who were involved in those discussions. So I just wanted to acknowledge that that is a matter that will be discussed around this table in terms of proceeding with dog parks and the likely location and costs as part of a further meeting. So I'll hand over to Dougal now to talk specifically about the paper that's before you today, which is around the dog registration fees and health registration fees.
Thank you. Good afternoon, councillors. Chairman. The paper before me that I'd like to present is really the recommendation for the adoption of the 2024-2025 dog control and health registration fees. If I just quickly whip through this, or would you like me to assume it's been read?
I think you can assume it's been read. Council have had this. Yep.
If I can assume it's been read, I'm more than happy to take questions regarding the fees.
Okay. Councillor Sol.
Thank you, sir. In going through this report, I see quite a few things that actually start to disturb me. I've been a dog owner of many dogs, actually, at one time and over many years, and been involved and understand the situation about having to register and chip these days of dogs. But the first thing that concerns me, and within our fees and so on of dogs, one of the areas on page 60 is saying that we should, that we actually, I'll get the exact words, sorry there, that when dogs are impounded for the first time, unregistered dogs, there is a fee of X number of dollars. Then when their unregistered dog is impounded for the second time, there is another fee. I'm starting to question where the heck we're at with this dog fees and dog situation in general, because surely that was the opportunity to make sure the dog was chipped and registered. So how come it's coming in a second time? That concerns me. These are things that worry me about how active we are within our dog policy in working with the public to make things happen and to operate with us. I look at other areas there too. There's quite a few things, to be honest, frankly, in this whole thing about animal controls and so on. The dog adoption fee is quite high, and I presume the adoption fee is because somebody's had the dog go to the vet and whatever. But that's quite noticeable. I then look at what we have about destroying dogs. This whole thing actually is a dog. And I wonder about how seriously we actually deal with dogs as a dog situation here, and we're charging fees to do it, and we're not going out and finding the stray dogs. How much time do we actually put in, I do ask, to actually actively try to find the dogs that are often the problem, and how we go about doing that? I basically don't think we do. And I would question it because I believe when we have doggy events, people turn up with their dogs. Do we actually check that they have been registered? Do we actually check that they have been chipped? You know, that's your opportunity to start showing that you're actually seriously looking at this. So to me, the fees, etc., that we wish to charge probably should be considerably more. Initially, it was, and we have a policy where it should be 80-20. 80% of the costs on the owner, 20% on the council. I don't entirely mind that. We provide sports grounds and so on for children playing sport. We provide various other things. So okay, maybe that's one of those things. Mr. McCabe earlier, doctor, suggested it's something that when people do it, they take it on their own, on what they basically want to do, and they should probably wear that. And actually, I'm starting to tend to feel he is quite right. So to me, this whole thing on the dog fees and the performance, and then let alone the other things carrying on down the line about dog parks, it's a nonsense, and we just need to stop it. So,
If I could interrupt you, please, councillor. So your question was, seemed to me to be in regard to what work council does.
how proactive we are when we have such opportunities, how we are actually justifying some of these things, and then expecting the ratepayer to pick it up.
So, Dougal, could we ask you to respond in terms of the process of investigating complaints in regard to dogs, please?
Complaints normally come through the front office through the service requests. If we've got roaming dogs, we've got barking dogs, we've got dog attacks. Anything to do with dogs normally come through as a service request, then our team go out and investigate. Depending on what they find, they might take the appropriate action, and that could range from a number of things. Unregistered dogs, we, as a general rule, try and get registered dog owners to register their dogs. And there's a process involved. By the end of July, around about 90% of dog owners have their dogs registered. We spend the rest of the year trying to find that other 10%. And it takes us a good time to get there, because at the same time, we have other issues to deal with as well, such as responding to dog attacks and issues in parks. We've just had another dog attack, which in Centennial Park, and it's quite traumatic for the owner. So we've got to spend time with these people and make sure we investigate, thoroughly. With respect to the impounding fees, I think you make a valid point. Why aren't they registered? Because we do make sure we don't give a dog back until it's registered. So that's a fair point, councillor. That's a very fair point. However, what I've noticed over the years is there's an increased amount of dogs being impounded. There's also a decrease in the amount of dogs being reclaimed, which will mean we've got an increase in the amount of dogs that we have to euthanize. The reason I haven't put the impoundment fees up is I don't want to prevent people from trying to reclaim their dogs. The majority of the increases have come from registration fees. If I put the impoundment fees up and the seizure fees, there's a high likelihood in this environment that people won't reclaim their dogs. We've still got to look after those dogs in the pound, and that costs money. And we've got to make sure they're looked after properly, fed properly and walked and exercised. So does that answer your question?
Mr. Chair, yes, it does, but it actually tells me very clearly that we don't charge enough.
Okay, thank you. If I could go on to, Councillor Murray Benge was next, please.
Right, we love our dogs, and when Tauranga and Western Bay combined funded Huhurua Park, and that was an area where you could run your dog free, and I used to take my dog there and loved it. It was a service to the sub-region, and it worked really well. Tell me though, Dougal, the reserve, the fund isn't paying its way. How much are we short in the dog budget?
In what regard? With
Funding of it.
With regard to the revenue finance policy, or?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We're currently looking at, with the increase in fees as they are, we're looking at covering 54% of our costs. However, we've run some stats. If we increased our fees by another $10, we'll be covering 59% of our costs, and that's including overheads. An extra $20 on our registration fees would increase to 64%. The only way we can cover our costs is by increasing it by another $50 a registration fee. That's going to take us into an area where people may start to think, and this is a real risk, I'm not going to register my dog, it's too expensive. And it's somewhere I don't want to go, because then all of a sudden my animal services officers are going to be running around chasing people for more registrations. that puts them in a situation where we've got to consider health and safety as well. And I don't want my animal services officers turning into bailiffs that are just collecting money.
So, sir, the 30,000 that's in the budget
Yes.
for, in fact, the dog parks, exercise parks, is that coming from rates or is that coming from the dog account?
That's coming from the dog account. The 30,000 we contribute every year.
So at which stage, through you to Alison, do we debate whether or not we can put that 30,000 back into the dog account? Which must come up at the time when we're having the debate about fencing off exercise areas.
I'll come to Rachel to answer that. I might put my foot on it.
Thank you, Chair John. And I think I'm just going to echo exactly what Alison said in her introductory comments, and that is that the time for considering whether or not you might like to proceed with a dog exercise park at Omokoroa or not, or choose another location, will be when that matter comes up for consideration in a couple of weeks' time at the Strategy and Policy Committee.
Got that, Rachel, but I'm asking, it's fun, we're talking about the dog account and the fact that it's not paying its way, and I understand that it quite clearly, if you do make it pay its way, it will be exorbitant to a lot of people. So I'm asking, there's 30,000 in that budget, and when does that get transferred, if it can, to a dog account? Is that for today? Is
Mr.
that for the
Holyoake,
next
can-
one as well?
Well,
Mr. Holyoake will answer
any
this.
credit back will be per the process that Alison and Rachel have just discussed. What I would say is that remember, there's a couple of things in that. Remember, $30,000 is just a very small part of the development of a dog park with the Te Puke situation, and the ones moving forward will be looking at substantial contributions from other organisations like TECT. So it's actually just a catalysation amount of money, if you like. If we're talking about $30,000 coming back into that account to reduce costs, that's very minimal. I mean, I think the gap is about 700,000. Is that right, Alison? It's about $700,000. So it's very, very minimal. It's not going to make a significant difference. So it can wait until that process has been gone through. What I will say is that one of the things that I've realised looking at the numbers is that if you look at the fees, and I do want to support what Dougal's saying in terms of that sweet spot. There is a space where we start to charge too much, and it exacerbates the issues and therefore the costs that we need to work through. So there is a sweet spot somewhere. I don't know whether we're bang on the sweet spot or not, but it's really important. The other point I was going to make is about overhead. So if we actually look at the fees that we collect, they probably actually cover all of the direct costs associated with the service. So the people that go out and do this job. It's once we start loading on top of that in a very correct way, the distribution of our overheads. Part of everyone's salary, including councillors, rents, and around the building, all of those sorts of things. Once we start bringing those things on top, which is the right thing to do, that's where we really start to get the problem. It washes its face in terms of just pure direct cost, but you can't run the numbers like that.
Further
Thank you.
question, sir.
Hang on, you've had a good cut. We've got a number of others waiting, so
Well,
we
I've
need
still
to
got a
move on.
question.
You can keep it for now. I may have time, we may not. Councillor Cox here.
Dougal, just wanted to ask a question, or two questions really. One around the health registration, something I didn't really know an awful lot about. And I just reading the feedback from the submissions that came in, and it said there was one inspection and then really they don't get anything for it. Presumably the fee also covers following up with people who don't meet the standards and complaints, so I would imagine there's that to it. But my question was, is the inspection done annually or is it a one-off? And my second question, might as well give you them both, just with the dog fees, with the cost of adoption for the pets, I'd be keen to know the percentage of dogs that are impounded that are adopted, and is that increase, particularly of $100, is that going to act as a deterrent to people adopting these animals?
Okay, if I may, can I start with the first question? Okay. Health inspections are done annually. They're also conducted when there's any complaints that come in. Now, I appreciate within the submissions, there was rather a long submission regarding hairdressers. What I've explained to that person is there's about 22 different things that the environmental health officer has to check for when they go into a hairdresser's and check for things. So there's a number of things there. So that the increase in cost is justified in, certainly, I believe so anyway. With respect to your dog question and the adoption, I can't answer that question at the moment, but I can get back to you regarding that question, regarding, how many impounded dogs are actually out for adoption. The reason the fee's gone up is because it's not a case of we're making money. It's costing us more to look after those dogs and get them up to scratch so they can be adopted. That's why the fee's gone up for the adoption. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Councillor Granger.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Diggle, just going back to that unregistered dog second impounding. So if I understand that correctly, when they're first impounded, that you get them registered and they go off and go on their way and chipped and all that good stuff. And then 3 years later or whatever, they don't re-register them and then they're impounded again. And so that would be the second impounding. It's not that it happened the next week.
It's a rare occurrence. If we have to impound a dog for whatever reason, you've got to pay if we've got to seize that dog, we've got to pay the seizure fee plus the impoundment fees plus the registration of that dog and any kind of assistance that we've incurred as a consequence of looking after that dog in the meantime.
Right, thank you, Councillor Joyce.
Sorry, Councillor Murray Benj actually asked my question, but I will follow up because you gave some interesting numbers. So when you said, I think it was an additional $10 would lift it to, what was it again? 59%?
59%, so an extra $10 on the registration fees,
Yep.
59%, an extra $20 would be 64%. However, if you want to get to the 75% revenue finance policy, you're looking at potentially $50.
That's
Extra.
75%, okay. The other question I had, so going back to Alison's comment, that discussion in 2 or 3 weeks' time, that's only about a Mokoroa, right? That's not about dog parks generally. Because as I understand it, the Katikati one's already going out to tender for the fence.
Correct, that is around the feedback from the consultation around the Amokoroa Dog Park.
Okay, thank you. Cool, those are my questions.
Thank you. I do want to get to recommendations, but you can have one more, Councillor Murray Benj.
With your experience, Dougal, what percentage of the dog reserves is going to pay for irresponsible owners, neglected dogs and roaming dogs and multiple pups from dog owners?
I've got to make sure I understand the question.
We've got, that every dog owner loves the dog. For those that don't and treat them poorly, what percentage of the reserves account actually goes to work with those people?
That's a good question. I can't give you those figures right now. That's some serious analysis I'd have to work out with that one.
Roughly? No?
I can't give you I can't even give you a ballpark figure. I'd have to really do a deep dive into that for you. But I'm more than happy to. Absolutely.
Well, thank you. I think that's exhausted the questions. So now want to move to the recommendations, but before I ask for a mover and seconder, there's been a bit of a change in regard to the recommendations as circulated with the agenda. So Penella, can we put that up, or shall I just read it? Yeah.
just to be really clear that the change made from what you saw in your agenda is just to be really clear on what it is that you're adopting. So we've just specified that it is attachment 3 of the report, being the statement of proposal.
Okay. Had a moment to take that in. Do we have a mover or seconder around the room? Okay, well, shall we go, suggesting I break this up?
Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to move. If
1
it's
to
going-
6? Yep.
It's 1 to 6.
Okay, thank you. It's been moved by the Mayor, seconded by Councillor Daly. You wish to speak?
Yeah, I do. I think I'm just responding to some of the earlier comments, both around the table and in the public forum. Dog parks are not the driver of dog fees. But I do feel that there is room in future annual plans to try to rebalance between the costs borne by ratepayers, general ratepayers, and those borne by users of the dog fees. And some of our neighbouring councils have somewhat higher dog fees, so that is something for a future discussion, and I hear the arguments about where the sweet spot is. But I think I would tend to aim for 80-20 as it would be my preferred option. But at this point, we are where we are. And I think I understand Dougal's point about unintended consequences and higher costs elsewhere that bubble out of charging higher fees. So I'm voting in favour of the recommendations and the other issues behind it, the health fees and so on. But I did want to signal that about dog fees, and that's maybe somewhere we can look at next year.
Thank you. You wish to speak? Yes. Thank you, Councillor Henry.
Yeah.
Was there a seconder?
Yes.
Yes, it's been moved and seconded.
Right, second it. I'm quite comfortable with the split for the dog parks. It's 80-20 as Councillor, as Alan has mentioned. We put a lot into other things that we enjoy, children and stuff like that, that some people aren't able to have children and their pets are thought like their children, and so they should be able to have the opportunity to take them to a park and enjoy the socialising that they will get from other dogs too. So I'm fully in support of that. But I'd like to acknowledge what Dougal is saying too, that unfortunately there are more and more less responsible dog owners, and it may be not necessarily on the surface a responsibility, but lack of finance to be able to maintain the dog that they have. And unfortunately, that causes a lot of problem for staff, the distance that they have to travel across our rohi to be able to find the people, locate the dogs and all that, that adds to the cost. And I'm sure that was factored into it. If we took that out, I think we'd be looking at a totally different scenario. So as I said, I'm in support of the recommendation as it stands.
Thank you, Councillor Wickers.
Yeah, I'll support the recommendations, but I just want to note that the position that we find ourselves in regard to the revenue and financing policy, which I see we're dealing with a little bit later. So currently it's a 80-20 split. It's been a recommendation in the report to change that because this came from a concern in the workshop back in February that we weren't meeting our policy. And so the response has been is to change the policy rather than try and meet the existing one. So I'm just noting that this is an area I think we do need to look at, because I potentially with the proposed financial policy that's coming up is that that potentially could go down to 40%, and that I think is not palatable. So I think we need to work on this, and as I say, the cost of animal services, I'm guessing the majority falls in dogs. Yep. And that the owning a dog, technically, all the cost should sit there. It should be 100%, even because it's the people who have the dogs that bring the problem that then the community need to respond to call Ghostbusters to come and sort it out. So I think we should look at that at another time, but it does need resolving in my view. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Joyce.
I'd like to move an amendment to increase the registration fees by $10 across the board. I'd have to wait till I got a seconder, but I'm happy to speak to that if I do.
I should ask for a comment, I think. So can we have some advice, please, Emma?
I think it's worth considering from the summary of submissions that most of the submissions were focused on opposing the increase in fees. And so I think we need to be really careful in terms of materiality change that hasn't been anticipated by the submissions, and whether you'd need to reconsult on that. There are also constraints in the Dog Control Act, which means it's not really possible to undertake further consultation at this time because we have to notify by a certain point the fees for the upcoming year. So I'm not sure an answer on the spot, to be honest. I don't know if Rachel might want to add to it.
So it seems to me that I can accept your amendment if I decide to, but the reality is that we're in a really awkward position in terms of trying to do that at this point in time, in contrast to the points made by Councillor Wickers that we can, and the Mayor for that matter, that should look at addressing this situation over coming years. So I suppose it seems I think you probably had a seconder there, so I probably should accept the amendment and rely on Councillor's judgment here. So you wish to move?
Yep. I mean, and I'd like to speak to it. Yep. I mean, we do have submissions in favour of meeting dog costs from the dog community, and I'm a dog owner myself, so this is certainly not my personal interest. But, you know, we're nowhere near our 80%. You know, the Mayor has already spoken about the fact we need to get back towards that. I'm paraphrasing, obviously, and Andy as well, Councillor Wickers. You know, Dougal has given us numbers that show that what that would do, and it would make a material difference. It is in line with at least some of the submissions we've had, and including some, you know, reasonably a large survey from Makaroa people. I'd also mention that in Tauranga, it's, you know, bearing in mind most people do take the base rate. Tauranga's already at $100, so, you know, that would lift us from 90 to 100. We're not disappearing off into the horizon. I do take staff point that the higher you go, the harder it is to collect, which is why I'm not sort of aiming to get back to the 80% straight away. And there's also two sides to this. There's both the costs as well as the revenue in terms of reaching a particular target. I'm acutely aware that every time we've looked at this in the 18 months that I've been on the council, you know, we've always said, oh, there's an 80-20 rule, there's an 80-20 rule. Now we've only recently found out they're actually only making 53% of our costs back from the dog owners. So we're just over half. And I think we need to, you know, get back towards our target. And I know we'll have a further discussion about this shortly, but, you know, the discussion is going to be allowing actually ratepayers to pay up to 75% according to that target. So, you know, I do believe we're not in balance yet with what the community feels, certainly in terms of our submissions, and what we have as our current target. So what I'm asking is that we move closer to that, ahead of a broader discussion, and in line with our neighbours in Tauranga.
Thank you. Councillor Henry, you wish to speak?
Yeah. I won't support the recommendation merely for...
The amendment.
I mean the amendment, sorry.
Yep.
Merely for the timing of it and the pressure that it will put on staff. And I don't think that this time that is really fair or it might be warranted, but I don't think it's fair. But I would like to see in the document that goes out that make it very clear that we are not covering the 80% cost. We know we're near it, and that signal that there will be upcoming, as we move through, we're going to be moving more rapidly towards meeting that cost, that figure. And I certainly do not want to see what we agreed with our communities about the dog parks. They were to be an 80-20 split, and if the community wanted more, they were to go out and raise it themselves, which is what's happened in Te Puke. So I would not really want to see a change in that. This is what happens when someone brings an idea along, and subsequent years go by, and suddenly it becomes something that it wasn't in the beginning, and our costs are running all over the place. So we need to keep in check what was the purpose of what we did and stick to it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Granger.
Thank you, sir. I just want to check that my understanding from what staff has said is correct, that any such change to the fees should have been done when it was first proposed before it went out to, for consultation, and that it's just too late in the day to do it now. And if we were to do it now, we would land ourselves in all sorts of hot water.
I think you've summed that up correctly. Do you wish to Okay. I've been advised we should finish the debate on the amendment before we discuss that, but as I said, my understanding is you summed it up correctly. I'll say that much for now. Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I want to thank Rodney. I think I support the intent, but I think we do need to do that in a considered and deliberate way, not as a last-minute amendment that hasn't been socialised even amongst councillors, let alone amongst the general community. So I think I support where you're going, and I support the intent to get there, but I think we just need to do it in a slightly more considered way, and we'll revisit this next year. So I won't be supporting the amendment, but appreciate the where you're coming from.
So we went out for consultation, have feedback about our dog fees for the 24-25, do it here. And one of the submissions I was reading is I would like for dog owners to be responsible for their own fees. As a non-dog owner, I don't feel other people should be subsidising anyone else's dog. This is the time to actually debate whether we are satisfied with the fees that we've come through. And the fact that we had a workshop on it is absolutely irrelevant, because we don't make decisions at workshops, and this is the place to make a decision. We've heard from Dougal that in fact we're not paying our way by any stretch of the imagination, and the longer you leave it, the worse it's going to get, Mr. Chairman. So I'm fully in support of the amendment. As for the dog parks, we'll debate that later.
Thank you. I'll just make one comment before I put the motion, that we did agree on what we would take out to consultation earlier. I'll just leave it there, remind you of that. So we now have put the amendment. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? No. All right, all those in favour, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. You got those names? And those against? So that accounts for all, 747. You've got those names? Yep. Okay, so I declare the amendment lost. So we will revert to the original recommendations as were moved by the Mayor and seconded by Councillor Daly. and I understand you wish to make a comment. Did you, Rachel?
Thank you, Mr Chair. Just to say, that acknowledge that it's a tricky situation, and that's largely arisen as a result of the statutory requirements of the Dog Control Act to adopt your dog control fees before you adopt other fees and charges. And that has meant we're slightly out of alignment in terms of consideration of the revenue and financing policy, having completed already consultation on the dog control fees. My advice to you broadly echoes what the Mayor has said, which is you do have the opportunity to revisit this through your annual plan process, which you start in September to October of this year. Perhaps I'll just park any further comments in relation to the revenue and financing policy for that paper when we get to it. But there is an option, and it could be that over time you work toward achieving that balance that you're looking for. If we were to as Councillor Wickers has suggested, look for a more stringent revenue and financing policy, or look to progress a more stringent revenue and financing policy that's moving more toward 100%. My suggestion would be that you would need to go through a process as required by the Act to consider whether or not there is any public benefit offered by the dog control activity, because in the past, and as is consistent across the country, there is a general consensus that there is public good in enabling our community to feel safe, recognising that dogs are a huge part of our society. So anything beyond 80-20 or 75-25 that we've had in the past, I believe would require a more considered approach to your revenue and financing policy at that point.
Okay, thank you. So we're now back in terms of the original recommendations. So I was going to go to James for a right of reply, but did you wish to speak? Yes, all right, Councillor Daly.
Yeah, I'm speaking to the original motion. I'm sympathetic with Rodney's amendment. However, if we're going to increase the dog fee on the fly by another 10%, then we probably should consider the other categories as well, like stock working dog. By increasing that 30% to 30% increase, you'd only add another $6 on the proposed increase. But I'm mindful of Dougal's comments about the effect of increased costs in terms of compliance, and we'll have another year of data and experience to see how we get on with this $20 increase with the general dog owning population, to see if the compliance follows or the dog registration numbers remain the same as at the current prices, and before we think about going even further, because there's always pluses and minuses, and Dougal's pointed out quite well, I think, the negatives associated with increasing costs too much. There was a program on TV within the last week, I think, about dog pounds an organisation trying to rehome dogs that have been abandoned or left at the pound. And while they're doing a great job, it just does go to highlight that people are quite prepared to abandon their dogs quite easily if circumstances are not favourable at home. So, so I'm supportive of the increase as proposed.
Thank you. Got a couple more, Councillor Stoll.
Thank you, sir. One of the first things, then I will go back to the start area there, and that's to do with licensing of premises, etc. And to be honest, there is a fairly solid submission from one lady, and I actually see some sense in what she has to say. But that's probably a situation as to the requirements from central government about why don't we have to check tattoo and piercing parlours, etc. Those things actually are quite a hole in what's there, especially as you've heard before, my trade is watchmaker and jeweller. I used to pierce ears, and I know it's a health risk, but there's nothing really on that. But in the end, I looked at this lady's reasons for objecting, and frankly, to inspect premises, and she's talking about her little premise that she has, the work is the same as what it is if it was a 12-seat salon. Basically, it's the same job. Unfortunately, I can't support her disagreement with that. So I'm comfy with where we're at. But I come back then to the dog issue. As far as I'm concerned, I would like to see us budget to be far more proactive to fix some of it, or try. We won't never fix it, I'm sure of that, but to try to fix a lot of these issues that we have with unregistered dogs, that we budget to actively spend time looking for them and sorting it. And I say that because I come also from Waihi Beach, and heaven help us, it's ongoing and it drives us nuts. And to be honest, we do not see that support there. So it needs to be budgeted for so that we can get it, because it's just a constant thing. So to me, sir, I just look at this and say, whilst it's great that there is an increase, frankly, it's inadequate. And that's how I feel.
Thank you. Councillor Joyce.
I mean, I agree with the councillor Sol on that last point. It is inadequate. It's out of line with our neighbours. I don't want to go with the amendment again, but I would make the point that if we call for submissions, we should have an opportunity at the end of those submissions to change what we're doing. Otherwise, why call for submissions? If the only option is to say yes, why bother having a meeting? You know, we should be around this table to make decisions. I fully accept if people disagree with it, that's absolutely fine. But being told that we can't actually make a decision, I have some problem with that. Because this is the governing body of this council. And yes, we're subject to the law, but you know, we should have the ability to change and make an amendment based on the submissions that we receive. And we're being told today that actually we can't. And I do have a problem with that.
We've already done the amendment. Yeah. Sorry. Did you want to have a right of reply? No. Okay. I'm ready to put the recommendations then. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? No. I declare it carried. All right. Thank you, Dougal. And Alison, I should say. All right, so moving on to item 2. Yeah. All right, Sarah, we're ready to move on with the next paper, adoption of the draft Treasury policy and supporting information. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Good afternoon. The purpose of this report is to seek adoption of the draft Treasury policy as part of the supporting information to go alongside the consultation document for the long-term plan. I'm happy to take the report as read, and if you have any questions, feel free.
From Councillor Coxhead.
Thanks, Sarah. I've got 4 questions. They're quite quick ones, so I'll just roll them off. So page 64, a funding maturity profile that is outside the above limits but self-corrects within 90 days is not in breach of the Treasury policy. How does it self-correct? I would have thought it would go up but not down.
I might point to Adele for this one. Thanks.
Just through the chair, I'll get our Treasury expert in to talk to that, if you give me a few minutes.
Okay, thank you. Second question, page 79, with the limits there, is it less than or equal to? It just says less than, but I would have thought it was less than or equal to.
It is less than, which is in line with the LGFA recommendations.
Okay. Do we have a quick ratio? So I notice we've got the liquidity ratio, but a quick ratio being short-term cash reserves or similar as a ratio of 12 months commitments or short-term liabilities?
12 months commitments.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so we do have a quick ratio, we just don't have it in here.
Correct.
Okay, cool. And in terms of it doesn't matter what page, approved financial instruments, I noticed shares aren't on there, although it does mention shares earlier in the report. If shares, I mean, I know there are councils that hold shares, so presumably only New Zealand shares, or is there more movement on that?
Correct, just New Zealand shares. No, so at the moment it's just CCOs and LGFA.
Yeah, so no publicly listed,
No.
that's what I thought. Thank you.
Okay, Mayor James?
Two questions for me. Is independent member Stuart Henderson satisfied with all the changes?
Correct, he did give us some really sound advice around some adjustments that he thought would be appropriate as well, and we've taken them into account.
Thank you. And the other one was, with these changes, are we in breach of any of the policies right now?
No.
Great, thank you.
There being no further questions, oh, sorry, there is. Councillor Murray Bench. Okay, thank you. So we have a mover. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Granger. Did anyone wishes to speak to them? In that case, I will put the recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. So moving on then to the adoption of the statement of proposal for review of water rates remission policy and remission of rates penalties. We have Katie here. 102.
Good afternoon, elected members. I'm happy for the report to be taken as read and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions? It seems not. So do we have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Daly, do we have a seconder? Mayor James? Any speakers? Councillor Murray Bench.
I think, sir, that this is a sound move, and once it went to staff for the remission policy, I think it has been quite successful. While it was with us, we're all such dopey, soft lot that we were happy to give anybody the reduction if they pushed us all hard enough. So it's a much more honest system now than we had in the past, so I'm very supportive of it.
Thank you. Councillor Henry.
Well, I don't really want to say you haven't got a forgetful mind. No, I shouldn't say that. But we have already broken this policy over this table twice. It's come to council, and I was quite interested in it because I was a recipient of having an excess water bill, and I came and got my, reduction.
Favouritism.
And then I had another one within the same time frame, and I didn't come to council because that was not the policy. And subsequent to that, we had a number of people who came in and presented their remissions on the second time within the time frame. And this council, not this council, but the previous one, or might have been this one, gave them. So if we're adopting this policy, I would like to, and hope that the councillors who are going to be making the decisions on it actually stick to what the policy is.
Thank you. Councillor Coxhead.
I'm largely supportive of these amendments. The only question mark I really did have and the only slight concern was in the instance where a penalty has been incurred within the previous 5 years, staff have the discretion to assess this as a case-by-case basis. I just wasn't as comfortable with that as I was with everything else in here, just my comment.
Yeah, and I would perhaps say, because I read that too, and so I'll just say that, you know, I think staff can be just as subjective as councillors. They might not be under some of the same pressures, perhaps, that councillors being lobbied, but I see I've offended someone already, so I'll say no more. So, Mayor.
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on Councillor Murray Benja's comment. I disagree with that we're dopey and soft. I know where she was coming from. I'd prefer to say smart but compassionate, which I think is where the policies, the place where the policies come from, yeah, compassionate rather than soft. So I think it reflects reality and how we need to look after our people in these tough times. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'll put the recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carry. So we are on to the adoption of the proposal for draft revenue and financing policy on page 118. And note that, again, there is a change there in terms of the recommendations before us. So I wonder, Penella, if we could have those up again, please. Do you wish to, in the meantime, while that's happening, Sarah, do you wish to make any comments?
Sure. So the purpose of this report is to seek adoption of the statement of proposal and the draft revenue and financing policy to go out for consultation alongside the consultation document. Please note we have removed SOAPs from our consultation document, and this will be something that we consider to implement in the future. As a result, we are seeking the adoption of tabled item 5 and tabled item 4 to replace attachment A and B of the published report, noting that they are identical other than we have removed any content relating to SOAPs.
Okay, so do we have any questions? First, Councillor Joyce.
So on page 129 of the, unfortunately, we don't have the tabled report, so that's the agenda. You've got bands regarding how we fund our activities. The first band is 15 percentage points. The next band is 30 percentage points. The next band is 25 percentage points. The next band is 20%, next percentage points. The next one is 10 percentage points. How did we end up with such a variable list size bands? Because it just seems to be that the mushy middle is going to get very mushy.
So as part of the banding structure, which we looked into, which a lot of other councils do, we found that this was best suited to the kinds of bands that we have. And the reason for that was to provide more flexibility with how we fund activities. So they might not be exactly the same in terms of splits, but it is what we think is the most appropriate.
Okay, Councillor Wickers.
Yeah, just to follow on from that, when you just look at that table, it has to, that and then the following pictorial have to go together to know so how we fund our activities doesn't actually say in that where it's actually coming from. So I think Councillor Joyce has perhaps misunderstood in a previous discussion that you have to look for that colour in the column of where the funding's coming from. So whether that could be in the description made a bit clearer. So as an example, when I say we fund something to a moderate level, is that coming from user fees? Is that coming from rates? Is it coming from grants? Has to be answered somewhere else.
Emily, did you wish to make a comment?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if Councillor Wilkes has any specific suggestion on how it would be better reflected, because the first table is obviously a key to show the splits, and then the second one attempts to demonstrate the funding sources. Did you have any thoughts on how that would be done in a more easily digestible way?
I only became aware of it because of what Councillor Joyce had said earlier, that I went back to this key to have a look and then read the words around it, trying to see if it pointed me to a better understanding. And that, so that's why I just noted to raise it at this point.
Okay, while they're thinking about that, we've got another question here from Councillor Cox.
Would we not just put the percentage in the boxes?
Are you referring to like the full band that that colour represents on each box?
No, not the band, the actual percentage. So,
I think that's the whole point, is that we're moving towards a banded approach, so
Yeah,
it is
okay.
less specific.
pie charts are the only thing they're going to look any good then.
Right, there's a little bit being digested there. I'm thinking, are there any more questions? Seems not. Do we have a mover for the recommendations as you see on the screen there? No one wants to move, I'll move them then. If I got someone to second it, Councillor Murray Bench. Thank you. Any speakers? Councillor Thwaites.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Northland Regional Council, Whangarei, Kaipara, Auckland, Hamilton, Waikato, Hauraki, Waipa, Rotorua, Tauranga are just examples of who can negotiate SUIPs. But somehow they've disappeared from the document I've read driving here today. So I just wonder how this has been changed. Clearly, a mistake was identified in what went out, that options 1 and 3 weren't palatable, but options 2 and 4 certainly were and could well have been retitled options 1 and 2 from the document rather than remove it completely. So I'd like to move an amendment that we go back to the original document and reinsert those, and reinsert that. And that will, and I'll speak to the next one next at the adoption of the CD.
Well, I think you had it well explained, not well explained, but you were.
No, I haven't had it explained at all.
There was an email yesterday, I believe, that gave an explanation, but anyway, going back.
Well, we don't make decisions at workshops, we make them here today.
Yeah, sure.
So, and that's why I've raised it. So
Yep,
how could
totally.
that have possibly gone from it without any discussion here today?
Yep. Accept your, I've lost the word, amendment, but in the firstly, before we proceed, I'm going to go to Rachel for an explanation.
So through the audit process, Councillor Thwaites, we received feedback that audit, who are in the room, would like to see some legal advice around whether or not particular provisions of the Rating Act had been applied appropriately. To be fair, that question did arise late in the audit process. We did seek immediate legal advice and got same-day advice that did suggest to us that the application of SUIPs was in contravention of a particular provision, Section 15 of the Local Government Rating Act. Put simply, in order for council to apply a SUIPs regime, we have to change the basis of rating of our entire district, not just one category of our district, to moving away from property as the basis for our application of rates to SUIPs as the basis for the application of rates.
This was signalled as a potential risk early on when the SUIPS discussion was bubbling to the surface, that perhaps this was better progressed through a rating basis review. And that is our recommendation, is that in order to achieve what council is seeking, it is most appropriately addressed through a rating basis review. And there are quite possibly other things. I note, Councillor Thwaites, that you have raised some other matters that you think would be usefully addressed through a rating basis review. So in terms of the way forward, although it means that it will be excluded from our consultation document as a proposal, if it were to be included, if it were to be reinserted as it was when you first saw the consultation document, it would compromise the adoption of our consultation document. I suspect it would compromise our audit opinion. So the most pragmatic solution has been to remove it in its entirety and then to discuss with council at a later date the scope for a rating basis review, which would include SUIPs and possibly some other things that you might like to look at.
Yeah, well, I just don't accept that answer, I'm afraid, because this is over 12 months away. It was introducing the topic to our ratepayers. We weren't going to introduce it as of from June the 1st. It's the following year. So I don't accept that it was linked to all that. It's quite simple. The wording was wrong for 3 or more or 10 or more properties. I accept that. But the SUIPs versus non-SUIPs is certainly much more simpler than was explained.
Okay, so thank you. So taking your amendment, do you want to repeat that, what you were saying?
The document that I'm reading here in front, that was there at 10
The
o'clock this
original
morning.
agenda.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do we have a seconder? All right, I declare it lost for the want of a seconder. So we will resume the original recommendations as moved and seconded. Do we have any speakers? Mayor.
Thank you. I think the changes proposed make a lot of sense in terms of differentials for industries that use heavy vehicles and so on. I am disappointed, like Don is, that we aren't able to move ahead with SUIPs right now. I look forward to having that discussion and seeing how we can move ahead with that. Bearing in mind, however, that our policy calendar is pretty busy with all the legislative changes that face us. But you know, I'm happy to work with Councillor Thwaites and see if we can beat SUIPs, because it certainly makes a good argument in terms of fairness and equity in how we charge our rates across the district. But we simply can't go and go out for consultation with a potentially illegal option. So but I'm in favour of the recommendations, and yeah, I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Are there any other speakers? Oh, yep, I did know that. Councillor Joyce.
I don't want to get in the way of the overall of this, but I'm really sorry, these targets are so loose. 40 to 75 is a huge band. You know, 15 to 45 is an even bigger band. You know, it's no point having targets if they're so easy to meet. We don't actually have to push hard. And that's what we've got. Going back to the animal control operational, I see that the 2 areas of green there, but I'd refer councillors to page 161 of the report, and I think it makes a very valid point. You know, the proposed approach in the policy is to allocate the moderate band, which means 40 to 75% of the activities costs will be funded from general rates. So that means we could be 75% rates funding on dog activities and still meet our target. Now, from the discussion earlier, I don't think many councillors would be comfortable with having the 75% allocation of animal control, dog control costs to rates. So we're going to ace that target, aren't we? Because we haven't actually really set a target. We've just left it. You know, we're at 53% now, and according to this, we can go down to 25%, and we're just fine. in terms of cost control. These are not targets. These are just the status quo, pretty much. And there's no stretch in here. There's no actual reflection of what the council believes should be there, even in the matter of the dog control. With the talk around the table is we want to get back as close as we can to 80% over time. I accept I lost the amendment today, but actually this policy would allow it to go to 75% rates funding. And I just don't think these are targets. These are not targets. These bans are so broad that there's gimmies. And I really, really am uncomfortable with bans that are 30 percentage points wide. That's not a target.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wickers.
So I'm on the same point there in regard to there may be unintended consequences from the looseness of some of these bans, and the debate that we've had around the dog control is one of them. I just will point out, Councillor Joyce, that it does say that its user fees covers 75 to 85%. Yeah, that's where I'm at.
Just to clarify, it was 75 to 85% from user charges before. What it says on page 161 is that 40 to 75% of the activities costs will be funded from general rates. My concern is not that, we're at 53% user fees now, so on that table we're at 47% general rates, right? It's just so loose that we don't really have a target. That's my point.
So that there is a mistake in the wording, because it should say 40 to 75% matches the moderate cost of user pays, not general rates.
It covers both, because they can actually go either way.
The other way is 15 to 45.
No, in the table, 40 to 75, it says for user pays is 40 to 75
Okay,
and
gotcha.
rates 40 to 75. It's
Gotcha.
both.
Yep. Okay, so that's the point I wanted to highlight, is that along with what Councillor Joyce is saying, is that the looseness of these bans create this situation, particularly where it would be hard to justify the low end of the user pays versus the high end of the general rates based on benefit to the person who's paying.
Thank you. Councillor Murray Bench. Okay, I heard you, Danny. All right. I think we're ready to put the amendment then. All those in, wash your mouth, John. I'm ready to put the recommendations. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Okay. Carried. Certainly can. Did you want? Yeah. Alan and Rod, Alan and Don both wanted their votes recorded. All right. Oh, sorry. I didn't catch that. Apologies. All right. If we move on to the final item on our agenda then is the adoption of the consultation document and supporting information. So, Emily, you in charge today, are you?
Yes, thanks, John. In Matt's absence, I'm going to speak to his report. There are a number of tabled items that replace a couple of parts of the agenda, mainly to reflect the removal of the SOAPs proposal. But I'm happy to speak to those as we work through the recommendations. Maybe might be the easiest. So I'd suggest you could consider recommendations 1 to 3 before receiving the report from the auditors. The agenda page is 165.
Note here that there's some changes again. I'm just wondering if we can pause a minute and if Penella can bring those up, please. So you can see there, clear line there under number 3. So if you're happy, we can deal with, I'm I could look for a mover for those first three recommendations. Is there someone who would like to move, please? Councillor Murray Benge, do we have a seconder? I'll second it then. Any speakers? Councillor Joyce.
To me, this is a very ugly long-term plan. It's better than the previous one, which was so aspirational that it just about fell apart soon after it got published. But that's faint praise. You know, we've got the local government minister saying, please prioritise essential services. We've got Statistics New Zealand and its inflation commentary pointing out that while inflation in the year to March was 4%, you know, rates and related services across the country, not just us, are up 9.6%. You know, I think there's more work to be done on this. I realise I'm a minority. You know, and we are doing some good things. We're focusing on infrastructure, but we still have quite a few bells and whistles in there that, frankly, when you stack it up against affordability, people would perhaps rather we wait. And I would encourage the public to have their say, including looking very closely at the affordability side of it. I don't want to put words in people's mouths, so that they've got to speak for themselves. I would also say that when those submissions come in, it's up to the mayor and councillors how much weight we put on them. And if it's not a numbers game, you know, if we have 1,000 people saying this and 100 saying that, and we believe the 100 saying something actually means more, that's up to the council to decide, which I fear, unfortunately, with the dog control fees before, you know, we were told, actually, it's not our job to look at that. You know, we can weight submissions differently. But I think the main thing I would say today is that I really, really want people to look at this and make suggestions on how we can save money if they want us to. Because, you know, these numbers are big. Numbers are big. Some of it's out of our control. Unfortunately, you know, the wastewater pipe in Katikati is falling apart earlier than planned. And that's a big number. But I do believe we've got more work to do on this, and I don't want to come back at the end of the submission period and hear, oh no, it's too late to make changes. I'm sorry, we are here as governors to make changes if we believe it's in the best interest of our public. And I do not want to be told that we can't.
Right, thank you. Councillor Murray Benge.
I agree with Rodney on that. Trust the people, our people. I found in this last wee while that a lot of people don't know how to actually speak out if they're opposed to something. And I would love to see a section in there that if you feel strongly about something, you're entitled to come to the council and speak in public forum and talk to the councillors directly. I really think that that's the power of democracy in action, and we don't do it enough. And I think that because people are really questioning the amount of rates that they're having to pay, and everybody is the same, and I think we've got ours down to a level which is debatable for people to tell us where in fact they want to make more changes if we can. And I think, so I'm very much in favour of this going out to the public and getting out there as quickly as possible. But I would like to see a section in there that tells people how to speak to the council, how to react. I've been to see people, sir, because when they've got a problem, that's what I like to do, and they don't know how to express their views, where to actually do it, and they're told by someone something, someone something else, but what are their rights, and how can they actually speak to the council directly? I think, sir, I'd love to see that being done by our council. We have a council of the size we are, so we're not too small and we're not too big. And we should be able to actually know our community as well as we should. And having them come in here and talk to us, I think, is a really strong platform for anybody in the community. And I do hope, sir, that we could actually encourage people to do just that. And if we are going to go out for submissions, then we've got to make a decision on it. In that dog control area, there was people saying, we don't want to pay any more. We want the dog owners to pay it. And so and we were told we couldn't. And I'm saying, sir, if the submission process is to mean anything, we've got to be prepared to listen seriously to what people are saying. Thank you.
I'll just remind you that we did approve in a meeting back in April to go out with the recommendations for the dog fees. And so, yeah, and then we had submissions and today we made the decision. So it was put out for submission. Thank you. Ms. Rachel, do you wish to comment?
Are there things being added into this long-term plan that weren't there before?
No.
Taken out. So they were not in the recommendations? We're making adjustments here.
It's just clarifying to make sure we've got wording correct so that there's no confusion as to what we're actually moving. Right, Rachel.
Mr. Chair, just before Emily talks through the tabled item, which I think is important, so you can have that level of comfort, Councillor Henry. I do want to address the assertion that was made around being told that you're not able to make decisions following submissions. That was not what was said. What was said is that when you actually analyse the submissions in relation to the proposal to increase dog registration fees, the vast majority of those that we did receive were against, naturally, against an increase to the dog registration fee. What was said was, when council chooses to make a decision, whether that is to increase the dog registration fee or to make it lower, there is a test of materiality that must be applied in terms of whether or not that triggers the requirement to reconsult, because if something is material, you're likely to capture a broader audience who possibly would have submitted had they had known that council was going to change or make this decision. So it's a materiality test, is what was talked about by Emily. So absolutely, it is your domain to make decisions. Completely agree with you, Councillor Joyce, that submissions are only one element of what you must weigh in your decision-making process, but there is a legislative test that requires us to apply materiality in that final decision you're intending to make.
Okay. Did I run out all? I hadn't come to you. Okay, thank you, Councillor Sol.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, I actually, in many ways, still echo Councillor Joyce and so on here. I just find at times some of where we've been going is perhaps just not meeting the times. And by the times, I mean the conditions in the world that we're living in right at this moment. So I find it extremely difficult in some of these areas for ratepayers to be facing such charges or increases. And I guess the number of like-to-haves that we'll be going into. This document, I guess, is the document that's there. Yeah, I've spoken earlier in workshops and said, hell, let's just get it out there and listen to the people. And that's the bit that I stick to strongly, listen to the people. And I think that's where I see it, sir. I guess where we're at present, there's no time for mucking around with it. Whether I agree with it or not, it's got to be out by the 17th, and that doesn't give long to go through any other processes. But really, there's a number of things I don't like. Thank you.
Yeah, James?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wish to just say it's been a lot of work to get to this point, and the staff have worked pretty hard on it. I think we've had a good discussion to get here. Yes, we do need to listen to the people. That's the whole point of consultation, and I don't like the idea of consulting with no intention ever to listen. That's anathema to me. But there are, and a lot of people, there are constraints to that, legislative constraints, and exactly how Rachel talked about, where you can't just take any idea on board because other people might have liked to have spoken about that and give their view on it. I also want to just highlight that we are going out with a materially lower than average rates rise across New Zealand. So we've done a good job. We've lowered it from a much higher number originally to a number which is lower than the national average. And I think we should be proud of that and confident that people can recognise that, and we're doing a good job in a tough set of circumstances. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Coxey.
I agree with what James just said in the context of what other councils are doing. We've done extremely well. Yes, of course, nobody wants to see rate increases, and certainly not beyond what was originally anticipated at 4%, but unfortunately it is what it is. Being a first-time councillor, this process has been a real eye-opener for me, as a ratepayer as well. So I had no concept before of how much you had to give up to actually be able to achieve a lower increase or none. And I also had no concept of the fact that if you push things out too far, they just get more and more expensive. So there is an obligation to complete certain things. So listening to the radio the other day, I heard Mayor Wayne Brown talking about the dog poo situation in Ponsonby and I think it was Point Chevalier. And so the people there have had their bins removed because in order to try and keep down the rates, people have had services removed that they now deem to be essential. So rather than having a bin on every corner for your poop, you now have to go twice as far to get to the next bin. And people are now leaving their little bags of delight on corners. And Mayor Brown came out with an article and said, well, you either want to reduce rates or if you want to reduce rates, we have to reduce services. And I couldn't agree more. So yes, back to you, James. I agree with you. We've done the best we possibly can under the circumstances.
Thank you. All right. I think we've exhausted the speakers. So. Sorry.
I didn't write them down.
Okay. Andy.
Yeah, a huge amount of work's gone into this, and just congratulations to the staff getting us to this point. Just the feedback on the document in regard to on each option, there's got this section, the impact on rates, just whether there could be some consistency around being able to, some of its percentages of this and some of it's a dollar value per whatever, whether it be simplified impact on the upcoming rates, impact on future rates, and just some consistency. So by looking at the options, they can actually compare the difference between them. That would be the only comment, but thank you very much.
Okay, one more. Grant?
Yeah, this is, I think, my third LTP as a councillor. It's been the most difficult one in terms of trying to get down to a palatable rates increase. And for an average urban ratepayer, we're talking about an increase of $500 or $600 in year one, let alone the following years, which are compounding dramatically. So I take on board everything that's been said by James and Tracy in terms of, you know, sometimes you just got to do what you got to do. But I've had quite a few comments when people see the cost to build libraries, for example, and I think we're going to get a bit more feedback this time about how much we're spending on some of these infrastructure that we're providing to the community. And so I look forward with interest to seeing how people value these services when they know how much they're going to start costing them. And so, like Rodney, I do urge people to put in submissions on this long-term plan document. And while I've had ratepayers suggest that they're sympathetic to ongoing needs, they are aware of what's happening around the country in terms of inflation generally and what other councils are doing. So there is a realism there, but it's still going to hurt to a lot of people who don't know what's coming, what's about to hit them. So, and that's the average Joe, you know, doesn't really follow council matters, but next time they open their rates bill, they're in for a bit of a shock. So it's those sort of people that really need to put their feedback into this long-term plan. Thank you.
Thank you. One more. Councillor Henry.
Yeah, so I guess when it comes around to this time and when we're making decisions about things, and I've been here a little while and seen that we've made decisions and now we're talking about and actually increasing them, that if we make decisions, we try and stick to them because things get out of hand in terms of what we're promising the people. I also want to make, without wanting to criticise anyone, just a bit of a comment about the document that's going out. I get down to I'm missing the pictures, Luke, the pictures of our people in the document. And I got down, the first picture I find is down in wastewater. There's a little bit of a pipe there. But then looking, I'm wondering, how come, maybe it's because we're trying to, save people's eyes and flicking through on the computer screen. But I see we've got more, the same amount of pages, if not more, in the document that goes out. So the white space is what I'm thinking about. The pictures took up the white space. It made it easier to flick through. Is there a reason why we don't have any pictures in there, in the document this time? It's something new for me.
Sorry, Councillor Henry, do you mean pictures of people or?
Yeah, well, we had pictures of staff and events that happen all through the document that we went out, but there isn't any except stick figures.
And kids colouring in competitions.
And the kids colour.
So we've gone with those ones
that's
instead.
the theme for this one, is it?
Yep, there's a method to the madness. There is photos submitted from the public that we aim to use for the final consultation document as well. It's a matter of a balance of having a document that people will read but not make it too long. This one is 16 pages shorter than the last one from 3 years ago. So again, echoing a lot of the comments councillors have said just before, it's a matter of getting people to, engage in the conversation, and part of our job as a communications team is to make that happen in terms of pulling this apart as well. So whilst this is a document that we hope people will read, it's putting it in places that people can get, the right information in front of them rather than the full document. So yeah, there are some images, but we've got to balance that with people being able to just read and digest the information.
Yeah. I did think it was a nice touch that you had the future ratepayers comments in there too. Just a positive on that negative.
Okay, thank you. I'm now going to put those first three recommendations, 1 to 3. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? No. Declare it carried. So, do you want to make any comments, or do you want us just to go straight to the auditors?
I think it would be appropriate for the auditors to speak now, since they've been waiting for a little while.
Okay.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Your Worship, councillors. So we've completed our audit. It was a bit of a tight squeeze and it took a long time. But I want to acknowledge your management and staff. I think they've been under pressure since COVID. And after that, they had some weather events to deal with that derailed some of your capital works that you were actually thinking of doing. So everything was a bit late. Your annual reports were late, annual plans were late, and this one you deferred by 3 months. And I quite understand why, because it's important to get this right. From our perspective, we are just the auditors. We've completed our audit and we're ready to issue an unqualified opinion, which I think has been shared with you. And that means that we believe the consultation document provides a reasonable basis or effective basis for public participation in consultation, and that the underlying information are reasonable. We've added one emphasis of matter, just emphasizing the uncertainty regarding capital doability, which is quite normal for all councils because, you know, costs are rising. Will there be suppliers available, like contractors, et cetera, et cetera. So as I say, it's just a normal emphasis of matter that I think all councils will get, and maybe one or two may get a qualification on it. So again, thank you very much to your management and staff, and I'm quite chuffed with my team as well that we actually got there today.
All right, are there any questions either for the auditors or for Emily? Seems not. Oh, sorry, Councillor Daly.
Well, it was really just the comment of, I know you've just sort of briefly explained that the uncertainty over the capital program delivery. And maybe could I ask you, how common is this among other councils, and what sort of level of non-delivery do we see across New Zealand?
It is quite common. It all depends on where you sit in the range, whether we qualify and say this is not going to work, this is unreasonable, or whether we say your assumption is actually reasonable, as in your case, and just draw attention to it. So it all depends on, you know, you're looking at 78% of budgeted CapEx, capital delivery works, actually being performed. So it's that comparison that we do. So it is common across New Zealand.
And could you comment on the effect of weather events on capital delivery? Is that, how significant is that?
It varies from council to council. In your case, there was the floods. Well, you know this better than me, but Upper Beach and bridge numbers, something that had to be replaced, meaning that you had to defer some other capital works. And other councils, I mean, Auckland had some significant weather events and storm events, and well, I'm not even talking about the Hawke's Bay. That's horrible. So yeah, it depends on the council. Some councils have almost nothing, but some do.
Councillor Murray-Benge.
Sir, I've always felt that the government should pay for your role in local government. Instead of that, we do. But I just want to say that you give us great confidence when you actually, as councillors, when you assess what we're doing, and we rely heavily on you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Oh, and I'll take your comment back to the Office of the Auditor General so they can talk to Parliament who should pay our fee.
All power to you. All right. I think we've exhausted all the questions. So I'm looking for a mover and a seconder for those last three. Councillor Granger, Councillor Coxhead. Anyone, any speakers? Yeah, can we put them back up perhaps then? Yep, there we are, 4, 5 and 6. I'll give you a moment to read them again. All right, we're all clear. We've been moved and seconded. Murray moved it and Councillor Cox had seconded it. No speakers? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? I declare it carried. So, thank you all very much for your attendance, and especially to our auditors for coming in and sitting through quite a lot of other information. So thank you very much for that. All right, I declare the meeting closed at 2:20.